Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know, we love to get our hands dirty and dig into some seriously fascinating books, and today we're tackling Business Analysis Methodology by Emrah Yayici.
Absolutely.
We'll be your guides extracting those golden nuggets of knowledge, kind of like those old-school prospectors sifting for gold.
Yeah, perfect analogy.
This book is packed with practical advice, and we're excited to break down the core principles and methodologies that can really make a difference.
Especially for anyone involved in developing products and services, this book is like a toolbox filled with essential tools for success. And just like any good toolbox, you need to know how to use the tools effectively. That's where we come in.
We'll unpack those tools and even show you how they can be used in a real-world scenario so you can see them in action.
Sounds good.
Now, you might be thinking, lean, isn't that for, like, manufacturing cars and stuff? But the truth is, the core idea of lean, eliminating waste to maximize value, it applies beautifully to business analysis, too.
It does. It really does.
It's about creating the right thing, the right way, right from the start.
And to do that, the book lays out 6 fundamental lean principles. These aren't just like abstract ideas, they're practical guidelines that can be applied to any project.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the first principle?
The first principle is being value-oriented. It's all about focusing on the outcomes, the actual benefits you're delivering to your customer.
Okay, so not just the outputs or the tasks completed.
Right. It's like, think of it as aiming for a bullseye, not just shooting arrows randomly. You need to know what target you're aiming for, which in this case is the value your product or service provides.
I like that.
You got to be laser focused on that value.
So how do we actually figure out what that value is? How do we know we're aiming at the right bullseye?
That's where the second principle comes in, being customer-centered. This means truly understanding your customers' needs, their pain points, what keeps them up at night, and also their aspirations, what they hope to achieve.
It's about being proactive, right?
Yeah.
Not just waiting for complaints to roll in, but actively seeking to understand your customers' needs.
Exactly. It's about listening to your customers, observing their behavior, and constantly seeking feedback.
Got it. So you're saying we need to get out of the boardroom and into the real world where our customers are.
Absolutely. And this leads us to the third principle, an iterative approach. You don't need to have all the answers up front. You start small, test your assumptions, gather feedback, and then refine your product in cycles.
So it's not about building the entire product and then crossing your fingers hoping it works. It's about building in stages, testing, and improving along the way.
Exactly. And while you're iterating, remember the fourth principle. Keep it simplistic. Don't overcomplicate things with unnecessary features or processes.
Keep it lean and mean.
Focus on what's essential to deliver that core value proposition. It's like decluttering your house, You get rid of things you don't need so you can create a more functional and enjoyable living space.
I can definitely relate to that.
In product development, we aim to simplify and streamline, focusing on what truly matters to the customer. Now, this next principle might sound a little counterintuitive, but it's super important. Don't be afraid of early failure. Embrace those early mistakes as learning opportunities. The sooner you fail, the sooner you can adapt and improve.
So it's about having a growth mindset, right? Viewing setbacks not as defeats, but as valuable data points that can help you refine your approach.
Precisely. It's about embracing that Japanese concept of Kaizen, continuous improvement.
Always striving to get better.
And finally, the sixth principle emphasizes optimizing your workflow. This means acting just in time, creating documents and artifacts with just enough detail to guide the process, but avoiding unnecessary overhead. You want to be efficient and effective with your time and resources, eliminating any steps or documentation that don't add value.
Okay, those 6 principles make a lot of sense, but how do they actually play out in the real world?
To illustrate these principles in action, let's imagine a business case. Let's say there's a local bakery called The Sweet Spot.
Okay, I like this already. Everyone loves a good bakery.
They want to launch an online ordering system to make it easier for customers to, order their favorite treats.
So how do these lean principles apply to the sweet spot?
Well, first, being value-oriented means defining what value this online system actually brings to their customers. Is it convenience? Speed? A wider selection? Maybe it's all of the above. They need to figure that out.
Right, and to figure that out, they'd need to be customer-centered, talking to their regulars, maybe even running a survey. to understand what features would be most valuable.
Exactly. They could start with a simple online menu and ordering system, gather feedback, and then iteratively add features like, oh, I don't know, delivery options, or maybe even a loyalty program.
Keeping it simple initially and avoiding getting bogged down in a complex system that might be overkill.
Exactly. And if their initial launch doesn't go perfectly, which, let's face it, it rarely does, they shouldn't be discouraged. They can analyze the feedback, identify areas for improvement, and adjust their approach accordingly.
It's all about learning and adapting.
And by optimizing their workflow, they can streamline the entire process, from taking orders to fulfilling them, ensuring a smooth and efficient operation for their customers. So there you have it, the 6 lean principles in action at the sweet spot.
I love how those principles can be applied to something as seemingly simple as a bakery's online ordering system.
Yeah.
It really shows how versatile and powerful the lean approach can be.
It really does. And that's just the beginning. The book goes on to explore so much more, like how to manage the demand pipeline effectively.
Okay, the demand pipeline. Now that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, think of it this way. Every company, regardless of its size or industry, is constantly bombarded with requests for new projects, new features, new initiatives.
Right, everyone has a great idea, but you can't do everything at once.
Right. And without a clear process for managing those requests, it can quickly become overwhelming. The book uses a brilliant analogy to describe this challenge in air traffic control tower.
Okay, I can see where this is going. So you have all these requests coming in like airplanes, all vying for attention and resources.
Exactly. And just like an air traffic control tower needs to manage those airplanes to ensure they all land safely, a company needs a robust demand management pipeline to evaluate and prioritize those requests. It's about ensuring that resources are allocated to projects that truly support the company's strategic goals, so you're not just chasing shiny objects.
So you're saying it's about having a system, a clear process for making those tough decisions about which projects to greenlight and which ones to put on hold.
Precisely. And for larger companies, this often falls under the purview of a dedicated enterprise architecture team, right? They're like the air traffic controllers, making sure everything runs smoothly and stays aligned with the big picture.
Right, they're the ones who see the whole airspace and can make those strategic decisions about which planes get priority.
Exactly. But what about smaller companies? Like our bakery, the sweet spot. They probably don't have a whole team dedicated to enterprise architecture.
Right, so who's in charge of managing the demand pipeline in those cases? Is it all on the owner or the manager?
Well, the book suggests that in those cases, the responsibility often falls on like project management offices, product management teams, or a group of experienced business analysts. Someone needs to take ownership of the process and ensure it's done effectively.
So in the sweet spot's case, the owner or manager might wear multiple hats, taking on the role of evaluating and prioritizing projects to ensure they align with the bakery's overall goals.
Exactly. The key is to have a system in place, regardless of the company's size, to effectively manage the demand pipeline and prevent what the book calls portfolio-level waste. You don't want to invest time and resources in projects that don't actually move the needle for your business.
That makes perfect sense. But what about those keep the lights on projects? You know, the ongoing enhancements and modifications to existing products or systems. The book mentions those as being a major challenge.
Oh, absolutely. Those can be a real drain on resources and time. While they're necessary to keep things running smoothly, they can sometimes distract from those big, innovative projects that can really drive growth.
It's like constantly fixing leaks in your house instead of focusing on, building that amazing new addition you've always dreamed of.
That's a perfect analogy. And the book really stresses the importance of tracking the cost of these keep the lights on projects. Sometimes those costs can exceed the cost of just replacing the entire system. That's what they call product enhancement modification level waste.
So for the sweet spot, this might mean really thinking critically about whether it's more cost-effective to keep patching up their old cash register system or just bite the bullet and invest in a new, more efficient point-of-sale system.
Exactly. They need to be smart about those decisions. And they also need to be mindful of the difference between enhancements that actually improve the product's value versus maintenance requests that just keep things running.
So adding a new feature to their online ordering system that allows customers to, say, pre-order those specialty cakes for special occasions, that would be an enhancement.
Yes.
Whereas fixing a bug that prevents customers from adding items to their cart, That would be maintenance.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes the importance of regularly reviewing these enhancement requests because some of them might become obsolete, due to changing business conditions or maybe customer preferences.
Like if the sweet spot initially planned to offer a gluten-free bread subscription service, but then found that there wasn't enough demand, they might just decide to scrap that project altogether and focus on something more popular.
Precisely. Eliminating those obsolete requests can free up valuable resources and prevent unnecessary work. It's all about being strategic and focusing on what truly matters. Now, to bring these concepts to life, the book introduces a case study. It's about a local consumer electronics company, or CEC, developing a mobile application.
Oh, perfect. This will allow us to see how these principles actually play out in a real-world setting. So tell me more about CEC. What's their story?
Well, they sell consumer electronics, things like TVs, speakers, headphones, through independent dealer stores. They have an outsourced call center for customer service and manage their operations using ERP and CRM systems.
Okay, sounds pretty standard so far.
But here's the catch.
Yeah.
They're lagging behind their competitors because they don't have an online sales channel. No website, no app, no e-commerce.
Whoa, really? In today's digital world, that's a huge disadvantage. They're missing out on a massive opportunity.
Exactly. And their CMO recognizes this and decides to jumpstart their online presence by developing a mobile app. Their goal, to be the first consumer electronics company in their market to offer a mobile sales channel.
Talk about ambitious.
And they're aiming for a quick launch within 2 months.
2 months, that's a tight deadline.
It is. But this is where the lean approach can really shine, helping them deliver a valuable product quickly and efficiently.
So the pressure's on.
It is. And I can't wait to see how they tackle this challenge.
Me too. But before we dive into that, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good.
All right, so we've got CEC, our consumer electronics company, and they're facing this really tight deadline to launch their mobile app. Where do they even begin? It seems like they need to lay some serious groundwork before they jump into writing code.
You're absolutely right. The book really stresses that the importance of strategic analysis and defining the product scope right from the get-go. It's like answering those fundamental questions, the why, the what, and the how of the project.
Okay, so for CEC, the why is pretty clear, right? They need to catch up with their competitors and establish an online sales channel. But how do they define the what? The actual scope of the app itself. What should it do? What should it not do?
That's where business analysts come in. They work with stakeholders, the people who have a vested interest in the project, to really understand and document those business requirements. It's like what the app needs to accomplish from a business perspective, not just from a technical standpoint.
So for CEC, this might involve things like figuring out which products they'll offer on the app, how customers will browse and search, what payment and delivery options they'll have,
Yeah.
and of course, how the app will integrate with their existing systems, right?
Exactly. You hit all the key points. And the book really emphasizes the importance of validating these requirements with actual target customers. You can't just assume you know what they want. You got to go out and ask them directly.
So in CEC's case, they might do things like conduct surveys, hold focus groups, or even observe customers in their stores to understand their shopping habits and preferences.
Right. You got it. It's all about getting that real-world feedback. And once they have a solid grasp of those business requirements, they need to document them effectively. The book discusses different types of scope documents, like a business case document for those large-scale projects, a vision and scope document for medium and small-scale projects, and then a statement of work document, or SOW, for smaller enhancement requests.
Okay, so which one would be most appropriate for CEC's mobile app project?
Well, considering their tight deadline and the potential impact on the entire company, I'd say a detailed business case document would be the best choice. It provides a comprehensive analysis of the project's feasibility, costs, benefits, and risks, everything those stakeholders need to make an informed decision.
It's like a blueprint, right? It lays out the entire project and justifies its existence to the people holding the purse strings.
Exactly. And the book introduces a concept called the rippling effect to highlight the importance of getting those business requirements right from the start.
Okay, I'm curious, what is the rippling effect?
Think of it like this. If the initial business requirements are flawed or ambiguous, it can have this cascading effect throughout the entire project, leading to inconsistencies in the user requirements, the functional requirements, and even the technical requirements down the line. Ultimately, it can result in a whole lot of waste due to rework, delays, and a higher number of change requests.
So it's kind of like a domino effect. One wrong move at the beginning can topple the whole project.
Exactly. And to avoid that, the book recommends getting those technical teams involved early on in the process, to assess the feasibility and ensure that the business and technical requirements are actually aligned.
So for CEC, this would mean bringing in their developers and IT folks right from the start to discuss the technical challenges, the limitations of the mobile app, and make sure it can integrate smoothly with their existing systems.
That's right. You don't want any surprises down the road. And another interesting concept the book explores is the paradox of choice. It's the idea that having too many features can actually overwhelm customers and lead to decision paralysis.
It's like going to a restaurant with a menu that's 5 pages long. You end up spending more time trying to decide what to order than actually enjoying the meal.
Exactly. The book advocates for a less is more approach, focusing on delivering maximum value with a streamlined set of features.
So for CEC, this might mean prioritizing those core functionalities. Browsing products, adding them to the cart, and completing the purchase, and then adding things like wish lists, product comparisons, or customer reviews in later iterations.
You got it. It's all about focusing on what's essential. And to determine those priorities, a formal prioritization process is key. The book recommends using criteria like business value and implementation difficulty to rank those features and decide which ones make it into the initial release.
So features with high business value and low implementation difficulty would be at the top of the list, while those with low business value and high implementation difficulty would be deprioritized. It's all about getting the most bang for your buck.
Right. And given CEC's tight deadline, they need to treat this project as a fast-track project, focusing on the must-have features that deliver that core value proposition, even if it means pushing some of those nice-to-have features to future releases.
So they need to be ruthless in their prioritization, cutting any features that don't directly contribute to their goal of launching that functional mobile sales channel quickly.
Absolutely. Time is of the essence here. And remember the 80-20 rule, which suggests that a majority of users only utilize a minority of product features.
So it's not about cramming in as many features as possible.
Yeah.
It's about selecting the right features that will actually get used and deliver value to the majority of users.
You got it. Quality over quantity, right? And the book cautions against excessive benchmarking and reverse engineering. While it can be helpful to see what your competitors are doing, the primary focus should always be on solving your customers' problems and delivering a unique value proposition.
So for CEC, this might mean looking at their competitors' apps for inspiration, but ultimately they need to focus on creating an app that specifically caters to their target market and their needs.
Exactly. It's about finding your own niche and excelling in it. And to illustrate this concept of starting with a core set of features and iteratively adding more, the book uses a great analogy, a golf cart.
Okay, I love a good analogy. Tell me more about this golf cart.
Well, imagine a golf cart. The core version has those essential features, right? The engine, the tires, the steering wheel, the brakes, and the seats. Those are your must-haves, the things you absolutely need to get around the golf course.
Right, you can't really have a golf cart without those basic components.
Exactly. But then you can add those nice-to-have features later, things like cup holders, a sound system, maybe a roof, based on customer feedback and what's trending in the market.
So for CEC's mobile app, this might mean starting with the basic functionalities, browsing products, placing orders, and tracking shipments. And then later, based on user feedback, they could add things like product reviews, personalized recommendations, or a loyalty program.
Precisely. It's about starting with that minimum viable product or MVP and then iterating from there.
I love that concept. Start small, validate, and then expand. So now that CEC has defined their strategic analysis and product scope, a big question arises. Which methodology is best suited for this lean approach? Waterfall or agile?
The age-old debate. The book delves into this very question, acknowledging that both waterfall and agile have their strengths and weaknesses. Choosing the right one really depends on the specific project and its context.
So there's no one-size-fits-all answer, huh? How do you decide which one is the right fit?
Well, the book uses the concept of entropy from physics to illustrate this point. Entropy is like the tendency for things to move from order to disorder.
So in a project context, entropy would be things like, the project spiraling out of control, deadlines being missed, the project scope expanding uncontrollably.
Exactly. Without a clear process in place, a project can quickly descend into chaos. But the book also cautions against being too rigid, over-standardizing everything. Trying to force-fit a single methodology to every project can be just as detrimental.
It's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Sometimes you need to adapt the tool to the task at hand.
That's a great way to put it. So let's break down the differences between waterfall and agile. Waterfall, as the name suggests, is a sequential approach where each phase of the project flows into the next, just like a waterfall cascading down a cliff.
So you typically start with requirements gathering, then you move on to design, then development, testing, and finally deployment. Each phase is completed before you move on to the next. It's very linear.
Exactly. And this makes waterfall well suited for projects where those requirements are well defined upfront and unlikely to change significantly, in those relatively stable environments.
But as the book points out, the business world is rarely static. Change is the only constant, and this is where Agile really shines.
Agile is all about embracing change. It thrives in those dynamic environments where things are constantly evolving. It's an iterative approach where the project is broken down into smaller cycles called sprints.
Okay, sprints, I've heard that term before. Can you explain it a bit more?
Sure. Each sprint typically lasts 2 to 3 weeks and involves all those stages of the project planning, design, development, testing, and deployment, all in a miniaturized form.
So instead of having one big release at the very end, you're having multiple smaller releases throughout the project, which allows for more frequent feedback and course correction along the way. You're making sure the project stays aligned with those evolving needs.
Precisely. It's all about adapting and adjusting as you go. And this flexibility and adaptability make Agile a perfect fit for projects with a high degree of uncertainty or where that customer feedback is crucial for shaping the final product.
The book also mentions the three manifesto statements of Agile, right? Working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. It seems like they really capture the essence of Agile's philosophy.
Absolutely. It's about prioritizing those practical results, working closely with customers throughout the process, and being flexible enough to adapt to those changing requirements.
So it sounds like Agile really aligns well with those lean principles we discussed earlier: eliminating waste, maximizing customer value, and delivering results quickly.
You're absolutely right. Agile methodologies often incorporate lean principles into their practices. But the book also acknowledges that there are situations where waterfall might be a more appropriate choice.
Okay, so it's not always Agile all the way. When would waterfall be a better fit?
Well, for projects with, say, a high degree of integration between components, where teams are geographically dispersed or where there's high employee turnover, a waterfall approach might provide a bit more structure and control.
So for example, if CEC had multiple teams working on different parts of the app, and those parts needed to integrate seamlessly, they might opt for a waterfall to ensure that everyone is on the same page and that the integration goes smoothly.
Exactly. And even within a waterfall project, it's possible to incorporate some elements of iteration, by increasing the number of releases, using prototypes to gather early feedback, maybe minimizing documentation detail, and breaking down those requirements into more manageable chunks.
So it's not a black and white choice. There's room for flexibility and adapting the methodology to the specific needs of the project.
That's the key takeaway. The book even draws this interesting parallel between these methodologies and the models used in physics. It compares waterfall to Einstein's deterministic models, which work great in those predictable static environments, and agile to Heisenberg's quantum model, which embraces uncertainty and change.
It's a fascinating comparison. So it sounds like the choice of methodology isn't about finding the best one, but rather the one that best fits the project's unique context and goals.
You hit the nail on the head. So how do you think CEC navigated this choice in their mobile app project?
Well, given their tight deadline and the need for flexibility, I guess they lean towards Agile. But they also have that need for integration with their existing systems, which might favor waterfall. It seems like a tough call.
You're spot on. The book explains that CEC actually opted for a hybrid approach, recognizing the unique demands of their project.
Oh, interesting. So they took the best of both worlds. How did that work in practice?
They decided to use Waterfall for that initial phase, focusing on delivering those high-priority core features of the mobile app within that 2-month deadline. This allowed them to establish a solid foundation and get a functional product to market quickly.
So for the initial release, they focused on the essentials browsing products, adding them to the cart, and completing the purchase, and they left out any of the bells and whistles.
Exactly. And by using Waterfall for this phase, they were able to ensure that the app integrated seamlessly with their existing ERP and CRM systems. No hiccups there.
But they didn't stick with Waterfall for the entire project, right?
Correct. For subsequent releases, they transition to Agile to implement those medium priority features and enhancements. This gave them more flexibility and responsiveness to feedback as the app continued to evolve.
So once they had that core foundation in place, they could be more iterative, adding new features, tweaking existing ones, and responding to customer feedback more effectively.
Exactly. And this hybrid approach proved successful. The initial release of the CEC mobile app was met with really positive results, exceeding expectations in terms of downloads and user engagement.
That's great. It sounds like they found that sweet spot between structure and flexibility, delivering a functional product quickly while still leaving room for iteration and improvement down the line.
Exactly. Now, let's shift gears and focus on the next crucial stage of the lean approach, requirements gathering. This is all about really understanding and documenting those detailed functionalities of the mobile app.
So this is where the business analysts really dig in and figure out exactly what the app needs to do, right down to the nitty-gritty details.
You got it. And the book really stresses the importance of ensuring that those user requirements, the functional requirements, and the non-functional requirements are all aligned with the overarching business requirements we defined earlier.
Right. It's about making sure everyone's on the same page and that the app is being built to meet both the business needs and the user's needs. No conflicting agendas.
Exactly. Now let's break down those different types of requirements. User requirements, they describe what the customer actually needs to accomplish with the product.
So for CEC's mobile app, a user requirement might be something like, as a customer, I want to be able to browse products by category.
Perfect example. Then you have functional requirements, which outline the specific functionalities the product needs to have to fulfill those user requirements.
So a functional requirement might be the app should display a list of product categories with corresponding subcategories.
Exactly. And then you have non-functional requirements, which address quality attributes, things like usability, performance, security, and reliability.
So a non-functional requirement might be something like the app should load in under 3 seconds, or the app should be accessible to users with visual impairments.
You got it. And finally, you have business rules, which define the conditions, the constraints, and the formulas that govern how those requirements are actually handled.
So a business rule for CEC's app might be free shipping is offered for orders over $50.
Precisely. Now, the book cautions against potential conflicts that can arise during this requirement gathering phase. Unresolved conflicts can lead to those costly change requests or CRs later in the project.
Right. We talked about those earlier. Change requests can really throw a wrench in the works, causing delays, budget overruns, and a lot of rework.
Exactly. And the book calls CRs the main source of waste in the product development lifecycle. So how can we minimize those costly CRs?
The book suggests a number of practical tips, right?
It does. First and foremost, focus on those customer needs, not just the technical features. It's about understanding the why behind the what.
So instead of just saying, we need a feature that allows customers to create wish lists, you need to dig deeper and understand why customers actually want those wish lists. Is it to save products for later? Share them with friends and family? Track price drops? What's the real motivation?
Exactly. Once you understand that underlying need, you can design a solution that truly meets it, potentially avoiding unnecessary features or complexity.
So we've gathered all those requirements, those really specific needs for CEC's mobile app. Now, how do we make sure they're documented in a way that everyone understands, that everyone can work with? There are a lot of moving parts here.
Absolutely. That's where the book dives into two key techniques for defining those user requirements. The use case technique, commonly used in Waterfall, and then you have the user story technique, which is favored in Agile.
Okay, two different approaches. So what are the main differences between those two?
Let's start with use cases. This technique involves a three-step process. First, you identify the actors, the people or systems interacting with the app. Then you define their goals, what they want to achieve. And finally, you describe how they achieve those goals through very specific scenarios. It's like creating a detailed script for how users will actually interact with the app.
So for CEC, the actors would primarily be their customers, right? And their goals would be things like browsing products, placing orders, tracking shipments, those key actions they want to perform on the app.
Exactly. And for each goal, you'd outline a series of steps the customer would take to achieve it. For example, that place an order use case might involve steps like selecting a product, adding it to the cart, entering shipping and payment information, and then confirming the order. Pretty straightforward.
Okay, I'm following so far.
Yeah.
And the book emphasizes the importance of separating main, alternative, and exception scenarios within a use case, right?
That's right. The main scenario, often called the happy path, describes the ideal flow of events. Everything goes smoothly, no hiccups. But then you have alternative scenarios, which outline other possible paths to achieve the same goal. For instance, a customer might use the search function to find a product. Instead of browsing through those categories, it's just a different route to the same destination.
Got it.
Ah,
And exception scenarios, those deal with unexpected events or errors that could disrupt the process. Like, what if a customer tries to order a product that's suddenly out of stock? Or what if their payment fails?
exactly. Addressing those exception scenarios upfront can prevent major headaches down the line. You're basically anticipating those potential problems and figuring out how the system should respond.
Smart. So now how do user stories differ from those detailed use cases?
User stories are much shorter, less formal. They're written from the user's perspective, following a very specific format. As a role, I want a goal, so that benefit.
Okay, that makes sense. So a user story for CEC's app might be, as a customer, I want to be able to save products to a wish list so that I can easily purchase them later.
Perfect example. And to add more detail and clarity to those user stories, the book emphasizes defining what we call acceptance criteria.
So acceptance criteria are like specific conditions that need to be met for the user story to be considered truly complete. For example, the wish list should allow users to add multiple products. The wish list should be accessible from any device. Users should be able to share their wish list with others.
Precisely. You're laying down the law, so to speak, making sure everyone understands what done actually means.
Now, the book raises an interesting question about the role of business analysts in agile projects. If the product owner is supposed to be the one defining these user stories, do we even need business analysts anymore?
That's a great question. And it's a question that comes up a lot in Agile circles. The book acknowledges that, in practice, product owners might not always have the technical knowledge or the time to effectively define and manage that product backlog. That's where business analysts can really step in and bridge that gap.
So they can either act as the product owner, or they can work very closely with the product owner to make sure those user stories are clear, concise, and aligned with the overall business goals.
You got it. It's about collaboration and leveraging everyone's strengths. Now, whether you're using waterfall or agile, the book really emphasizes that lean principle of just enough when it comes to requirements documentation.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between too little detail and way too much detail.
Yeah,
You don't want to drown people in information, but you also don't want to leave things open to interpretation.
exactly. Too little detail leads to ambiguity and misinterpretations, while too much detail creates unnecessary complexity and can really bog down the project. It's about providing enough information to guide the development process without, overwhelming everyone with paperwork.
The book also advocates for using diagrams, things like flowcharts, to really enhance communication and reduce information overload. I'm a very visual person, so I appreciate that.
Visuals are incredibly helpful. Flowcharts, wireframes, mock-ups, it can really help convey complex ideas and make sure everyone's on the same page.
And the book also makes a point of emphasizing the importance of creating documents that are actually used, that are maintained, not just filed away and forgotten.
Absolutely. Documents should be living, breathing resources, updated throughout the project lifecycle to reflect any changes or new insights.
So if CEC discovers new requirements or needs to make changes based on that user feedback, those changes should be reflected in the documentation. It's a constantly evolving document, not a static artifact.
Exactly. And the book advocates for just-in-time documentation, which means defining those requirements in a logical order, starting with those high-level business needs, and then progressively moving towards the technical details as you go.
So you wouldn't start by documenting the specific code required for a particular feature. You'd start by outlining the user's goal, then work down to the functional and technical requirements needed to achieve that goal.
Exactly. It's about breaking that documentation process into manageable chunks and providing information when and where it's actually needed. No more, no less. Now, once we have those requirements nicely documented, what's next on the agenda?
Well, I'd imagine it's time to move from the what to the how, right?
Yeah.
We know what the app needs to do, but now we need to figure out how it's going to look and feel for the user.
You're right on track. The book moves on to UX design and usability, emphasizing that functionality is only one piece of the puzzle. A successful product also needs to be intuitive, user-friendly, and ideally enjoyable to use.
Right. It's not enough for the app to just work. It has to be easy and pleasant to use. Otherwise, those customers might get frustrated and just abandon it altogether.
Exactly. You don't want to create a clunky, confusing app that sends users running for the hills. And the book draws some unexpected inspiration here, mentioning Antoni Gaudí, the legendary architect whose work was known for those organic forms and that focus on the user experience.
And that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought to look to architecture for inspiration in UX design. What's the connection there?
Gaudí believed in observing and understanding how people interact with their environment. He designed spaces that flowed naturally with human movement and behavior. He really considered how people would use those spaces.
So applying that to UX design, it's about understanding how users will interact with the app and designing an interface that feels intuitive and natural.
Precisely. It's about anticipating those user needs and behaviors and creating an experience that feels seamless and effortless. The book also credits Steve Jobs with really humanizing technology through his relentless focus on usability.
Jobs was famous for wanting Apple products to be so simple that even a child could use them. It's about removing that complexity and making technology accessible to everyone.
Exactly. And to achieve that level of usability, the book outlines a lean UX design approach that's both user-centered and iterative. It starts with identifying those user profiles, considering factors like age, tech savviness, and their goals for using the product.
So for CEC, they might create profiles for different types of customers, like tech-savvy early adopters who are always on the latest gadgets, casual users who just want a convenient way to shop, and maybe even older customers who might be less comfortable with technology.
Exactly. You want to make sure you're designing for a diverse range of users, considering their different needs and preferences. And then based on those profiles, you can create what we call personas, which are those fictional characters that represent those different user groups.
So they might create a persona, named, say, John, who represents their tech-savvy early adopter. John's in his late 20s, works in IT, is always on the lookout for the latest gadgets, and wants a mobile app that's fast, feature-rich, and allows him to customize his experience.
Exactly. And then they might create another persona named, say, Mary, who represents their less tech-savvy customer. Mary is in her 60s, retired, enjoys gardening, and just wants a mobile app that's simple, easy to use, and doesn't require her to learn a whole bunch of new things.
So by designing for those specific personas, CEC can ensure their app actually meets the needs of a wider range of users, not just one specific group.
Precisely. It's about catering to a diverse audience. And the book really emphasizes the importance of interaction design, which focuses on how users navigate through the app and accomplish those goals. It suggests using those flowcharts we talked about earlier for use cases as a basis for that interaction design.
So those boxes on the flowchart would represent different screens or sections of the app, and those arrows would show the flow from one screen to the next, like a visual roadmap of the user's journey.
Exactly. It helps you visualize how the user will interact with the app and ensures that the flow is logical and intuitive.
Okay, and then comes information architecture, which is all about organizing and structuring the content within the app.
Right. It's about making sure the content is easy to find, easy to understand, and easy to use. The book really emphasizes conciseness and usefulness when it comes to content, short, to the point, and relevant to the user's needs.
So no walls of text or those jargon-filled descriptions. Keep it clear, simple, and helpful.
Exactly. And the book suggests using techniques like card sorting to actually involve users in that process of organizing the content.
Card sorting. How does that work?
You write down different pieces of content on cards, and then you ask users to group those cards into categories that make sense to them.
So for CEC, they might write down all their product categories on cards and then have a group of potential customers sort those cards into categories that feel intuitive to them.
Exactly. By observing how users group and categorize that content, you can get really valuable insights into their mental models and design an information architecture that actually aligns with how they think.
Now, once you have that interaction design and information architecture in place, you move on to the user interface design, right? This is where the app starts to take shape visually.
That's right. UI designers take those concepts, the flowcharts, the card sorting results, and turn them into a visually appealing and functional interface. They're the ones who make the app look good and make it easy to use.
And the book stresses the importance of prototyping and iterative testing throughout this whole process, right?
Absolutely. Prototypes allow you to test those design assumptions early on and get feedback from those users before you invest too much time and effort in actually building the real app.
So for CEC, they might create a simple, clickable prototype of their app using a tool like Figma or Envision, and then have potential customers test out that prototype and provide feedback on how easy it is to use.
Exactly, and based on that feedback, they can make adjustments to the design and continue testing until they have a user interface that's both aesthetically pleasing and easy to navigate.
The book also talks about the role of prototyping in those agile projects, suggesting that in some cases, that working software can actually replace those prototypes, especially if the user stories are really well defined and small enough to be developed quickly.
That's right. In Agile, the goal is to deliver working software as quickly as possible, so if you can build a functional piece of the app that represents a user story, that can serve as a prototype for testing and feedback.
So you're getting that user feedback early and often, which is one of the core principles of Agile. And the book also emphasizes the need for simplicity in UI design.
Absolutely. It's about creating an interface that's intuitive and requires very minimal learning, removing those unnecessary elements and really focusing on clarity and ease of use.
It reminds me of that famous quote by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry: "Perfection is achieved, not when there's nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away."
That's a perfect analogy. Good UI design is all about stripping away the unnecessary and focusing on what truly matters. Now, once you have that UX design in place, it's time to move on to the more technical side of things, building the app itself.
Right, all those lines of code that make the app actually work. This is where the developers really shine.
Exactly. And the book talks about the importance of having a flexible technical architecture, especially when you're using an iterative development approach like Agile.
So the app needs to be built in a way that allows for changes and updates without breaking everything. It needs to be adaptable.
Precisely. You want to avoid creating a fragile system that crumbles under the weight of change. And the book cautions against the dangers of refactoring, which is basically changing the underlying architecture of the app after it's already been built.
That sounds like it could be a real nightmare, like trying to renovate a house while people are still living in it.
Exactly. It's much easier to build that flexibility into the architecture from the beginning than to try to retrofit it later on. You want to set yourself up for success from the get-go.
And the book emphasizes designing those flexible data models that can accommodate future needs and changes as the app evolves.
For CEC, this might mean designing a database that can easily handle new product categories or changes to their pricing structure without requiring a major overhaul.
And with the rise of big data, the book highlights the importance of leveraging those data insights to actually enhance the product.
So CEC might collect data on how customers are using their app, what features they're using, what products they're searching for, and use that data to personalize those recommendations, maybe improve the search functionality, or even develop new features that really meet those emerging needs. It's all about using data to make the app smarter and more user-friendly.
And the book also emphasizes the importance of DevOps, which is that practice of integrating development and operations teams to really streamline the process of building, testing, and deploying the software.
DevOps can help to reduce those errors, speed up the delivery, and improve the overall quality of the app. It's about breaking down those silos between teams and fostering collaboration.
And speaking of quality, the book devotes a whole section to quality assurance and testing, which is crucial for ensuring that the app meets the desired quality standards and minimizing those defects that can lead to waste and rework.
Exactly. You want to catch those bugs and usability issues before they reach the customers.
Right, it's much easier and cheaper to fix a problem during development than it is after the app has been released to the public.
Absolutely. And the book emphasizes that testing can't guarantee zero defects. It's just impossible to test every single scenario and every possible user behavior.
So you're saying it's a matter of prioritization, focusing on the areas where those defects would have the biggest impact.
Exactly. You want to focus on those high-risk areas. For CEC, they might prioritize testing that checkout process because any errors there could result in lost sales and frustrated customers.
That makes sense. And the book highlights the importance of early testing, including those reviews of requirements, documents, prototypes, and even the code itself. Catch those problems early, and they're much easier to solve.
Absolutely. And the book also mentions automated testing to streamline that process of regression testing, which is making sure that those new features don't break existing functionality.
So you're not constantly having to manually retest everything every time you make a change.
Exactly. Those automated tests can run much faster than manual tests, which can save a lot of time and effort, especially in an iterative development process where you're constantly making changes and adding new features.
And finally, the book emphasizes user acceptance testing, or UAT, which is where real users actually get their hands on the app and test it out in their own environment, seeing how it works in the real world.
UAT is that final filtering point for defects. It's crucial for making sure the app meets the needs and expectations of those actual users.
So CEC might recruit a group of their target customers to participate in a beta test of their app before they release it to the general public.
Exactly. Get that real-world feedback before you go live. Now, the last stage of the lean approach to business analysis is project management, which might seem like it's outside the scope of a business analyst's role, but the book argues that it's actually crucial for ensuring that the project is delivered on time, within budget, and of course meets those defined requirements.
Right. It's about keeping things on track, making sure everyone's working towards the same goals, and delivering that successful product.
Exactly. It's about bringing all those pieces together. And the book differentiates between product scope, which is all about the features and functionality of the product itself, and project scope, which is all about the work needed to actually build and deliver that product.
So the product scope for CEC's mobile app might be, the app should allow customers to browse products, place orders, and track shipments. The project scope would be all those tasks involved in actually building and launching the app, like designing the UI, writing the code, testing the app, deploying it to the App Store, all those behind-the-scenes activities.
You got it. And project managers play a crucial role in defining that project scope, breaking it down into those manageable tasks, assigning those tasks to team members, tracking progress, managing those inevitable risks that pop up, and of course, communicating with those stakeholders to keep them informed.
So they're like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everyone's playing their part and that the music comes together harmoniously.
That's a great analogy. And the book emphasizes the importance of avoiding the output trap, which is focusing on just delivering outputs, checking off those tasks, without ensuring that those outputs actually deliver value and contribute to those desired outcomes.
So it's not just about doing the work. It's about making sure that work is actually moving the project closer to its goals. It's about effectiveness, not just efficiency.
You got it. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Business Analysis Methodology by Emrah Yayici. It's been a fascinating journey exploring all those key concepts and seeing how they can be applied to a real-world project like CEC's mobile app.
I feel like I've learned so much from this deep dive. The book really breaks down those complex concepts into easy-to-understand language and provides tons of practical advice that anyone can use, whether they're a seasoned business analyst or just starting out.
Absolutely. And I think the key takeaway is that lean business analysis is really all about maximizing that value for the customer, making sure you're building the right thing while minimizing waste throughout that entire process so you're doing it efficiently and effectively.
It's about building the right product, the right way, right from the start. And it's about continuous improvement, always looking for ways to do things better, faster, and more efficiently.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. We hope you found it insightful. Until next time, happy analyzing.